Vermont is Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, it's good to see you. Thank you for talking with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Can you give me a reaction to what you're seeing in Washington over the last few days?
Well, I can give you a better reaction about what I'm seeing here in the state of Vermont, and that is my phones are bouncing off the hook. And almost unanimously, people are saying, do not get involved in a bloody and chaotic civil war in Syria. I think people are also concerned that the president and other members are prepared to go forward without the support of the United Nations or NATO, do it in a unilateral way, which in many people's opinion sets a very, very bad precedent.
So, Senator, have you made up your mind based on those phone calls?
Well, what people in my state tell me is certainly influences me greatly, but I have not made a final decision because I don't know what the final resolution is going to be that we'll be voting on. And I certainly want to hear the debate, and I want more information from the administration. But I will tell you this, that I have very, very serious concerns about this course of action. You know, in our country today, if you ask the average American or the average Vermonter what's going on, they will tell you that unemployment is much too high, wages are much too low. We have to deal with issues like global warming. We're concerned deeply about the quality of education in America, and we're not dealing with those issues today. And if we get involved and into a quagmire in Syria, many of the most important concerns that ordinary Americans have, jobs for their kids, education, will be pushed aside. And I think a lot of people are concerned about that.
So you don't believe we can have a limited strike?
I think it is possible, but I think if you pay close attention to what the Foreign Relations Committee did yesterday, they very much broadened the definition of what that resolution is about. And really what it comes down to now is not just the so-called surgical strike to punish Assad, who's clearly a terrible dictator, using chemical weapons against his people, atrocious. What the resolution is about is saying we're not just going to punish Assad, we really want regime change. We want to change the momentum on the ground. So you've got a couple of factors. What happens if the war does not go well for the opposition? How much money, how much effort do we spend on that? Do we start training troops there? What do you do with the facts that maybe 20 to 25% of the opposition are Islamic fundamentalists, some of them affiliated with al-Qaeda? How do you deal with that? Look, we went into Afghanistan, we thought that was a slam dunk. 11 years later, 12 years later, we're still in that war. We went into Iraq, no problems. 4,600 deaths later, $2.5 trillion later, we're still concerned about that war. So the Middle East is a quagmire. I think we've got to be concerned. I hope we can find alternative methods of dealing with this terrible dictator other than just using, getting involved militarily.
And what if Syria uses chemical weapons again?
Well, you got to use, you know, there are a lot of problems in this world, and it's atrocious. But right now, we have 14% of our people unemployed, 20% of our young people unemployed. What about those kids? What about the 40% of young black kids who don't have a job?
But is it an
what
either
about
or?
Global warming?
Is it an either-or situation?
Well, I'm afraid
why can't we do both?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, the Congress can't even do the simplest things. Right now, the Congress doesn't even discuss massive unemployment, the growing gap between the rich and the poor. What do you think happens if you're involved in a war in Syria? Do you really think that Congress is going to start addressing the important issues facing the American people? Furthermore, I have to say that I find it interesting that right now, today, as a result of Republicans refusing to raise taxes on the wealthy or corporations, we're throwing children off of Head Start. We're denying basic nutrition, Meals on Wheels programs to vulnerable senior citizens. Who's going to pay for this war?
I was going to ask
you. The wealthiest people?
Well, I was just going to ask you what you think it would cost. What do you think a limited strike would cost the United States?
I think a limited strike would not be terribly expensive. It's a one-day war. I don't know what it is, 50 million or 100 million. But if it is, as some people in the Senate want, regime change, that will be expensive. And if we get dragged into this thing in months or years to come, it could be very expensive. And the people who will end up paying for this war Trust me, and not the top 1%. There'll be children being thrown off of Head Start and old people who will not get nutrition. Those are the people who will pay for the war.
Have you been talking to your colleagues in Washington, and do you have some sense about how this vote might go now?
I really don't. I think it's going to be a strange vote. I think you're going to find some Republicans voting against it, some Republicans voting for it. With the Democrats, it will be the same.
And you're the independent here. Can you tell us where you are leaning?
Well, I think I've just told you some of my concerns, but I do want to, I don't know what the final resolution will look like. I don't know what amendments, if any, will pass to change the resolution. So I can't give you a definitive opinion right now as to how I vote because I don't know what the resolution will look like. But I can tell you that I have serious concerns.
Senator Bernie Sanders is up in Burlington, Vermont tonight. Senator, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, next up on Al Jazeera, Secretary of State John Kerry says he believes the majority of Syrian rebels are not al-Qaeda. So who